see
man of the
you,
century.
my friend. We can't hear you.
Okay, here we go.
Now
There
we can
you
hear
are.
you.
You can hear me. Oh. Well, it's like crossing the continent, isn't it? Going
Absolutely.
Climbing Everest, climbing Brian's Everest. Hello,
Mr. Davis, where are you?
Ivor. I'm in the deepest, darkest Ventura, California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, hi. So I'm just up the road from you. You guys are in You're in Los Angeles, aren't you, Sherry?
No, I'm in British Columbia, Canada.
Okay. Well, how is it in Canada?
We're warm. We're warm like California now, so it's great.
Good.
And then Ivor, we have Linda Steele. She's driving someplace right now.
Oh, yeah, I could see Linda in the car.
Hi. I normally don't drive and do Zoom calls. This is, I promise I'll be careful. I'm just, something had come up.
Linda, please, can't you just park? Because I think we're all getting a bit nervous.
No, she's used to doing this. She's really good. She's used to doing this.
I'm always on the road.
Linda's our trailblazer. We follow her lead.
All right. So
Oh my God.
I'm going to get this going. So, all right. So we have award-winning, best-selling author, investigative journalist, reporter, junketeer. This guy's done everything, stuff that I didn't know that he did. I'm glad to call him my friend, Ivor Davis. So one of the books, now I read this one. This is called The Beatles. Had me on here. This is a really, really great read. This is going to go to Linda. I know Sherry will want one of them. But his latest book, which he was been telling me about for years that he wanted to write, on the Charles Manson trials, where he was in there in the courtroom almost every day, if not every day, right, Ivor? But before he answers
that's absolutely. Oh my God, that's my children's book.
So Ivor, I'm going to let the girls start first.
Yeah.
Mr. Davis, I know that hindsight is 2020.
You can, Sherry. When you say Mr. Davis, I'm starting to feel elderly, although I am elderly. So you can call me Ivor.
With great respect, Ivor. When you were with the Beatles for 34 days in 1964, at the time, I know now it's not enough days to do a tour with them, but at the time, as you had said, that the Beatles, it was almost like the poor boys were in prison because they were so popular. Was 34 days enough for you at that time to travel with them, or were you just scratching the surface?
Well, I think I was scratching the surface, but it gave me, Sherry, a terrific feel for the passion that the fans had for the Beatles and the Beatles' incredible talent. Because on the tour, not only did they perform sometimes twice a day, they had hilarious press conferences, and then we flew in their private chartered jet, and we got to know them, and we played Monopoly with John in the middle of the night. So by the time we were finished, I thought I got to know them pretty well. And they were even then, don't forget, they were 50 odd years younger. And then the world has seen what great talents they are, what music they play. And I want to tell you that I used to see them, I could wander into their suite, I could scrounge a free drink from their mini bar, which I did. And they were sitting on the floor writing music. So because they had another album. So, these guys were talented as young men. And as they grew older, they became even more talented.
Well, and for our audience, Ivor Davis was the first to travel with the Beatles on their first U.S. tour in 1964. And I found it interesting in your book that you said that when you asked them what's your favorite thing about America, they said color television.
Yes, well, because don't forget, Sherry, what happened was color TV was not in England. So as soon as the boys arrived, and first thing I saw them in the San Francisco Hilton Hotel when I was introduced to them, they ignored me. They had a changer, one of those things you can actually click and change channels. Can you believe it? And they had a color TV. and they were looking at a giant 14-inch screen, a 14-inch giant screen. So yeah, it was wow. Remember, anybody watch TV in? Don't answer the question, Linda. Stop watching television right now. I don't know how you do it. I mean, can you imagine? We used to. You're all too young. You used to have 14-inch televisions. Amazing.
Mr. Davis.
And now they're
I
90.
know that that's a pretty big size TV.
Back then.
Ivor, when you joined the Beatles on tour, I know that you were ghostwriting for the great George Harrison. When you were going to join the bus, did your angle of covering them as a ghostwriter change during the 34 days, or did you stay on the same path?
Well, I mean, what I saw was a crazy. I mean, I knew about music. I'd seen the Beatles back in, believe it or not, in let's say 1964, on television, black and white TV, on the Ed Sullivan Show, when 70 million Americans tuned into the Ed Sullivan Show, and that's how the Beatles were introduced to America. So then that's the only thing I knew about them. You've got to remember, I say ladies, Linda and Sherry, and Brian, of course, the communication wasn't the same. We did not have iPhones, we didn't have anything like that. So everything, you had to wait for the newspapers. We didn't have non-stop talking heads on television. So the knowledge of the Beatles in America was so flimsy. They'd had a couple of hit records, one hit record, I Want to Hold Your Hand, but we didn't know much about them. And even I, living and working in America for a big London newspaper, did not know much about them until I got thrown in their midst. And it was fun.
Ivor, I remember you saying that you didn't even want to go on tour with it. You were like, when they first got here, you're like, why do I gotta go on tour? Is that correct?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Brian.
Yeah,
I don't know if
I said you didn't really even want to go on tour with the Beatles when they first get here because you.
Well, I mean, first of all, I like pop music. I like Presley and Bill Haley. I mean, the girls probably think Presley. Who's Presley? Who's Bill Haley? No, I'm kidding.
Not at all.
But not really. But you're going to go back. I guess you girls did not grow up. Sorry that you don't want me calling you girls because. But who did you grow? Let me throw it back to you guys. Brian, Sherry, Linda, who did you grow up with loving music-wise?
Honestly, because I was always with my mother and I had siblings who were older than me, loved Elvis Presley, loved the Beatles, my favorite music is 70s music. So all the people you're talking about, I know everything about, even the big band, because my dad listened to that. So we were a big music family. I have zero talent in the musical industry. I don't play one instrument. I can't sing, but boy, do I love music. So, and I feel like I was brought up in the wrong era. I grew up in the wrong era because I even love 60s. So, yeah, I know everybody you're talking about, and I appreciate all of them.
Yes. And what about Sherry? I mean, who else did you? I mean, you obviously had a terrific pop rock 50s 60s knowledge, but I just wondered, Brian, what about you?
Well, my mother was always pretending that she can sing in front of the big huge stereos, if you can remember that. I think she was a singer, so I would hear all these, James Brown. My dad listened to James Brown. She liked Aretha Franklin and all this stuff, and Motown. So at that point, when you connect a lot of the dots, when these people finally get together, they grew up on a lot of jazz. If you go to a lot of the jazz, New Orleans, all of that stuff, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, that's who the Beatles were listening to. Those are the people, when I finally got to meet them, I was honored because I grew up listening to that. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah, but Brian, all the ones, Little Richard, all the ones you just mentioned were heavily influenced the Beatles. I mean, look at the Roll Over Beethoven was not a Beatles song, so they were influenced by many of the black musicians of that era. And Elvis Presley, I don't think was black, was he? No.
No, but Elvis gave nothing but a hound dog. He got that from,
Yes.
we know where he got it from.
Yeah.
So that's that. But also, talk about this. I'm going to skip around because I'm the only one that's read the book. Talk about that concert, being with the Beatles, and all the girls doing jelly beans.
Yeah, well, you see, what would happen was somebody said on the road, somebody said, oh, George Harrison loves jelly beans. But what he loved was the English jelly beans, which were soft. And unfortunately, once the fans heard that he loved jelly beans, they went out and they bought these little American jelly beans, which were actually like little rocks. And so I want to tell you, I sat in the front row every concert, and the girls threw jelly beans at George, but it's a long way to throw. And guess who got jelly beans in the back of his neck? Me. So, and you know, if we were together in the room, I would show you the scars on my neck. No kidding, but I got hit by jelly beans. So they were like little rocks. And I mean, in Chicago, for example, somebody threw strange things at George, shoes and a steak in Chicago. Thank heavens it missed everybody, but can you believe it? A steak? So with jelly beans and steaks, you know, we needed armored neck pieces or whatever. And then of course, as you know, if you've seen any of the film footage, the girls tried to jump on stage and grab the Beatles. So every concert, there was a little army of security people who were keeping the girls back. Now, the other thing is, and I'm sure, well, you're all too young to remember when the Hollywood Bowl had a swimming pool fountain in front of it. I was at the Hollywood Bowl with the Beatles, and about 10 girls jumped in the pool and swam to the Beatles. So they swam to the Beatles. Don't ask me what they were going to do. If they got to the Beatles, got out of the water, hugged George with his electric guitar, the girls would have gone up in a puff of smoke. But fortunately, the security people fished these girls out. Don't ask me how they dried them down, and the girls went back to their seats and kept screaming. So it was kind of insane. And I'll just add one thing. John said to me at the end of the third tour, we've had enough. He said, because they don't come, we're like performing fleas. He said, they don't come to hear our music, they come to see us. And we don't want to be circus freaks. So that was after 1966. Anybody here remember 20th century 1966? Anyway, it's a long time ago. After 1966, in San Francisco, the Beatles stopped touring forever, and they never gave a public concert after that. 1966, they performed on the rooftop in Abbey Road, but never before a live audience. And that's why, because they wanted their music to be appreciated, not themselves.
You must have, after having all those objects thrown at you, you must have been so relieved when they started throwing bras and panties, right? That's so much softer.
Yeah, again, I'm sorry to say this, but some of your sound, maybe it's the Hollywood freeway that's going above the noise. Can you just repeat that question? I must have been relieved of what?
What I said was, after having all of those hard objects thrown at you, you must have been so relieved to have the bras and panties thrown at you.
Well, yes, you know, the trouble with, I mean, I think, I mean, this may be sexist, but the age of the girls at the shows was very young. I mean, they're like 15. And with all due respect, a lot of those 14-year-olds didn't wear bras yet. So there was a minimum number of bras that I saw flying through the air. And the only one that threw panties when I went, the only ones that threw panties was when I went to see Tom Jones. Anybody know Tom Jones? I used to cover his Las Vegas shows, and that's when the women threw their bras and their panties and their rookies, Tom Jones.
Ivor, talk
So
about.
it was a relief. Sure.
Did you say a relief? Yeah. Go ahead.
Hey, Ivar, talk about that meeting where there's no footage or photos when the Beatles in Beverly Hills go to Elvis Presley's mansion.
Yeah, let me tell you about Elvis. But can I ask a question to these lovely ladies? I mean, you know the answer to this, Brian. But I want them to guess. Okay, 1964, I go to 35 concerts, don't ask me, all over the country. And how long do you ladies think the Beatles performed on stage? Now, I want, can you mind if they gave me an answer?
I read that, so I do want to say.
What was the answer?
30 minutes, you said, and I was surprised by that, because you just get a quick taste. But Ivor, can I ask you, in your book, you mentioned that America made Ringo Starr. Can you explain that?
Yeah, again, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that. I don't know if Brian is getting the sound loud and clear, but again, I have to ask.
Yeah, Brian, you're getting really bad feedback. I don't know if we can start again,
Sherry, ask your question again to him.
Ivor, in your book, you had said that America made Ringo Starr.
Oh, have I lost you?
No, you're still there. He asked the question, America, that you said America made Ringo Starr. Was that right, Sherry?
Yeah. Mr. D.
Yeah, well, yeah, for some reason,
yeah, we're getting overpowered.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm going to try and, there we go.
No, Ivar, you're good.
Am I good? Okay.
You're
Well,
good.
I can't see you, so you just tell me if you can't hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. You're wonderful.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep talking even though I can't see the lovely ladies. Okay, so the reason I said that, I mean, Ringo sang very little. He was the drummer. He was the newest boy on the Beatles block. And he started off, people didn't know him. He'd taken over as a drummer from a guy called Pete Best after much aggravation. And suddenly, everybody loved Ringo. I mean, I spoke to many of the fans, and they said they were madly in love with Ringo, and that Ringo was madly in love with them. So I think he was madly in love with about 4,200 young women. Anyway, that was the story. And at the end of it, as we were going back to England, there were signs on the street that said, Ringo for president. So they loved Ringo. There it is. Now, I must say, I'm talking to an empty screen. Can you assure me you can hear me? You can hear me okay, but you can't see me, can you?
We can hear you. We can see you fine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll keep talking if you don't mind. And you can hear me, that's the important thing. And you can see me, that's even less important. But go ahead. So that was the reason why Ringo became so popular. He was kind of one of the lesser known of the Beatles. I mean, Paul was the handsome, dashing one. John was the kind of crazy provocateur. And George was the surly one who didn't say much, didn't talk much. So go ahead with your other question.
So, no, my question was, talk about that meeting, the famous meeting that no one really knows of, when the Beatles went to Elvis Presley's mansion.
Okay, well, as I say, so I'm going to give you the answer, and if you can still hear me, can't you?
Yes.
Okay, well, I can't see you, unfortunately, and I'm gonna bug on. So anyway, so what happened was the Beatles always wanted to meet Elvis. And the reason they wanted to meet Elvis was that John grew up on Heartbreak Hotel, Blue Suede Shoes. But in 1964, on that first tour, there was no way they could get together. Colonel Tom Parker, who was the manager of the Beatles, who was the manager of Elvis, and Brian Epstein, manager of the Beatles, met in the Beverly Hills Hotel to talk about bringing their acts together, and it never came together because Elvis was making movie after movie after movie, and the Beatles were on tour. But then in 1965, Brian, and I think you know this story, but I'm going to tell it again. In 1965, I got a call from the road manager of the Beatles, Al Evans, and he said, come over to the house. We're going to see Elvis. And indeed, I raced over to the house, and we jumped in the limos and went to Elvis's house in Beverly Hills. Elvis had a house in Beverly Hills, and he had he had his mansion in Memphis, Graceland. But when he made movies and when he performed in Southern California, he had this house in Beverly Hills. So we arrived at the house, and I want to tell you, it was a strange meeting. And it was actually, let's see, it was 55 years ago this month that I went with the Beatles to meet Elvis. Cut a long story short, we walked into the house. A young lady with her hair about high, taller than she was, turns out to be Priscilla, says hello and ushers us in. The Beatles come in, but nobody in the house has this common sense to say, Elvis, I'd like you to meet John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And for 10 minutes, we sat around like frozen statues, while Elvis clicked on his color TV without any sound. And then 10 minutes later, Elvis said, hey, you guys, he said, I'm going to bed unless you want to jam. And of course, that broke the ice. And the Beatles started playing music with Elvis. A lot of the black performers, a lot of the Elvis songs, no Beatles songs. After that, the Beatles and Elvis became much more friendly, and they started talking, and the ice was broken. But Elvis, of course, looked like Elvis. He was wearing his kind of almost stage outfit, and he had sideburns that were like thick shag carpeting. And so it was a meeting of the great performers. But, I'll tell you this, Brian knows this, the manager of the Beatles, Brian Epstein, said no pictures, no recordings, there is not a single Elvis in the Beatles anywhere in the world. It's a sad situation. They decided to go to photography. But I was lucky enough to be the fly on the wall, people getting together, getting friendly, stuff like that. So it was quite an historic get together, and unfortunately, we don't have to prove it, but they really did together.
Sherry, I know you want to ask something.
I can't hear anything, Brian. There's too much feedback. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
Sherry.
there is a lot of feedback.
Sherry, go ahead and ask your question to him.
Go ahead, Brian. I can't hear anything.
Ivor, so when it came to the sound of the Beatles playing, what was that like at the concerts?
The sound of the Beatles playing was not quite as bad as the sound you and I and the girls are having. It was, don't forget, 55 years ago, the sound systems in stadiums were not very good. And over half a century ago, they were playing in huge, giant places where their sound system for rock and rollers was non-existent. I mean, they had a couple of sound systems that were just pathetic. I mean, but even at the Hollywood Bowl, it wasn't that good. And when they played the Hollywood Bowl, and they played the Hollywood Bowl, they tried to make recordings of the Hollywood Bowl as a record, and it was pretty impossible because the sound system And then one final thing I'll add to that. Not only was the sound system to hear the music appalling, but the girls screamed non-stop from start to finish, and we couldn't hear what the Beatles were singing, and the Beatles couldn't hear what they were singing. So that was the answer to that question. All right? Sound system 1964-65 was terrible.
Ivor, talk about how long did it take you to write this book?
Well, I mean, look, the event happened 56 years ago. My first travel. Before I went on to travel out to in America, I used to run into Brian at the press television critics thing, and you get on with your life. And then about 15 years ago, my kids said, "Hey, Dad, you never told us about the Beatles." I said, "Oh, the who? No, not the Who, the Beatles." Okay, so yes, afterwards I finally wrote my book. It took me maybe 9 months. But once I got into it, I got carried away with it and had great fun remembering of what had happened. So by the time from start to finish, my book was finished.
Linda, do you have a question?
I do have a couple questions actually, and I'm also getting a lot of feedback, but I am getting the gist of everything that's being discussed. So I have a couple questions. My first question is, how did you get so lucky to be the one being able to tour with them and being able to report all of the things that you are, all these great memories? How were you so lucky to be the one chosen?
Well, you're right. I was very, very lucky. But here's how it happened. I was the West Coast of America correspondent for the London Daily Express, which was a huge paper in England, one of the biggest papers, 4.5 million readers every morning. And my editor called me up and said, "You're near San Francisco, you're in LA, I was based in LA, get on the plane and join the boys for the tour." I said, "Which boys?" And then he said, the Beatles, of course. So I was very lucky to be the foreign correspondent on the West Coast of America, and the Beatles happened to arrive on the West Coast of America, San Francisco. So I was the obvious choice to go and join them. At the same time, my editor in London said, "You will also be writing the column for George Harrison, because George Harrison has been commissioned by our newspaper to write a column, and you will be ghostwriter." So there it was. I was his ghostwriter, and I was covering the tour, and so I set off, not knowing that it would be an amazing experience that we're talking about more than half a century later.
Linda, your next question.
Everybody's going to be reading your book, or anybody who's read your book already, for you to be terrific, because when you're a fan of a group like that, you want the inside scoop, you want the background stories, you want, I mean, what we see as the public is what we see, but everybody knows that there's a whole other story that goes on behind closed doors. So for us to be able to get a little glimpse of that is really very exciting. So thank you for writing, about all your memories, because it's fascinating to all of us.
Well, the funny thing is, I'm going to a Beatles convention today. I'm going to stay home because they've got a virtual Beatles convention, which is crazy. But there it is, next weekend in Chicago. And I'm not going to Chicago anyway. So this Beatles have got me for a long time. And I've had such great fun talking to Brian, talking to you, talking to audiences around the world about this amazing Ticket to Ride.
Okay, we got about 5 minutes on this. Ivor, give your website and the links that you contact you, how they can buy your book.
If you want to read my Beatles book, or you want to read anything about me, you go to www.ivordavisbooks.com, and you can buy my books about the Beatles. You can read my children's books, which is about four penguins who want to be big stars like the Beatles. And you can read my awful, horrible story about Charles Manson using the Beatles supposedly to carry out a series of horrible murders. And if I make this client, I can't see through, and the sound isn't that fantastic. So I think we're going to do something with it later on. I hope we can reconnect, because it's difficult talking to the lovely ladies and you, Brian, to an empty screen.
All right, I'm going to end this. All right, so Ivor, Terry, Linda, this is Movie Reviews and More, WomenOnTV.tv. This is part one, and we will see you next week. We're going to come back to part two.